But I do want to welcome you along, and greetings to you from the not so sunny Orange in the central west of New South Wales, where these days our temperatures are always only in single digits. So wherever you are in the country or possibly the world, welcome along. This is a really important masterclass that Pete's going to run from my perspective. For the last 4 and a bit years, I've been running a business called Justified Talent. We are a boutique recruitment agency that specializes in working with small business owners specifically to recruit their first sales professionals specifically. So it's very, very boutique. And it took me a couple of years to work out that I needed to start saying no to some people when they would come to me to help them recruit their first sales professionals. Because as much as the idea of bringing your first sales professional on board can be incredibly exciting, and you just imagine somebody working, 8 hours a day, hopefully more, but imagine them working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, exclusively focused on generating new revenue for you. How exciting is that prospect? I know, having had 8 businesses, I know the idea of bringing that person on, and that's all they do. Wow, that's just going to change the world in which we find ourselves. And as much as I wanted to be the facilitator of that, what I was coming to learn was that there was a whole bunch of people who I would place who would then not work out, right? And that kind of confounded me because, I think I do a pretty good job of due diligence and getting an understanding of, what this person has got in their tool bag in terms of sales capability. My background's in behavioral psychology. I'm not interested in looking at people's resumes and cover letters. We use 6 different instruments that are fit for purpose, designed to get an understanding of who is this candidate and what have they really got in their tool bag. And so, I would scratch my head and think, what the hell happened there? So long story short, what came out of that was that it turns out too few small business owners or businesses actually have the sales ecosystem in place that's going to support the new sales hire. And that's what today is all about. Right, Pete, who I've got a lot of respect for, I guess in particular because Pete has only recently come out of being in founder world, as opposed to someone like me who's been a bloody consultant for many, many, many years. Right, so Pete's actually been where you are. And has been in the thick of building businesses and getting them to gather momentum and to deliver outcomes. So he's very, very close to that world. And he's going to share with you all today the how-to, if you like, in terms of getting your sales ecosystem prepared so that when you do then bring that sales hire on, you're actually giving them the best possible opportunity to be successful. Is that a good summation, Pete?
I think it is.
Cool. And where this has all come from, and I'll just do this very, very quickly. A couple of years ago, I created what we describe as a sales readiness to hire scorecard. For those of you that haven't done the scorecard as yet, Pete's going to make reference to it at some stage through the masterclass. You'll get an invitation to complete your own scorecard as you see fit. It's very simple, 16 questions across 4 topics, which will allow you to be thinking about, have I got these things in place? And so we're going to be looking and talking about, can you afford to have this person on board at the moment? Have you got the systems in place that are going to be needed to support the sales activity specifically? Is your business and brand, in fact, well known and well regarded? So what's its marketability? And then importantly, how about you as an individual? Because the moment you bring a salesperson on, you just got a job title change. You're no longer just the managing director or the founder or the CEO. You're also now the sales director or the sales manager, right? And so they're the things that we cover in the scorecard, but importantly, they're the things that Pete's going to cover in this masterclass today. So with no further ado, Pete Solway, it's yours.
Thank you, James. It's look, that's really good context, right? So just to give a little background, and as I flick over to some slides, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But I've not only built businesses from early stages of founder, raising capital, self-funding, I've also been the first sales hire. And in the last business where I was pounding the pavement and actually in the role that James was talking about, I was hired when a founder had built a piece of software and he'd got about $1,000 worth of revenue, right? So real micro business as far as revenue is concerned. And I went through that journey, and it took a lot longer than it probably could have to make our first $1 million in revenue, because I didn't have all the right support and systems in place. I went on a journey. I had an amazing sales director coach who took me up a really significant learning curve. I tried and failed at many things, and then eventually, reach those levels of success and have that, I guess, hindsight and all of the things that I wish had been in place for me as a first sales hire, but also from the business owner's lens as well, because I understand what it's like to be a founder and have ownership in your baby, and you're trying to get that accelerant of growth. And something that James talks about, which is a really key stat in this, space, is that 48% of first sales hires fail, which is just like horrifying as a small business owner, right? Like the amount of cash that you put in. I was speaking to a client I've recently started working with, right? And they're like, it's like a $30,000 to $40,000 investment to give someone a proper crack at being a first sales hire. Like, we can't afford to get this wrong more than once. Like, that could really break the whole business. So, going a little bit slower, crossing your T's and dotting your I's before you hire them, or doing, processes that allow you to really experiment with that sales process to get it right, before you bring that sales hire and really change the likelihood of all of this being successful and you as a founder getting the result that you're after. Now, the beautiful thing about James's scorecard that I'll also go into some more detail with is that not only does it give you, how sales hire ready you are, but the great thing is that as you increase the results that you get on that scorecard, right? Yes, you're becoming more sales hire ready, but guess what? You're doing this work in relation to sales. And when you improve things that are related to sales, you make more money. So it makes it even more affordable to hire the said sales rep. And I'll talk to you in a moment about a client that I worked with, who actually went on that journey and became sales hire ready. And he ended up tripling his business before he even hired the sales rep that he was planning on hiring in the first place, right? And so there's lots of benefits to looking at this from a strategic lens as a founder. So anyway, that's the little introduction. I'm going to go in and share my screen and put on the PowerPoint and start talking you guys through and giving you guys a little bit more structure to demystify this. How do you hire a salesperson and actually build a sales team from the ground up as a founder? So here we go. I will go and share my screen and kick off the presentation. That's all showing up and nice and clearly, isn't it, James? Perfect. I got the thumbs up. So sales hire readiness, hiring the right team from the ground up. Super important to have these things in place. So you can see here, I've got a little quick agenda, not super detailed, but high level. I'm going to cover my background and the context. What does it look like to become sales hire ready? What's a quick example of the strategy you can put in place and the type of results that you can get? The key mindsets. Before we jump into the nitty-gritty tactics and things, there's a couple of key perspectives to have about the way of looking at sales hiring, sales growth, that really make all the difference between the effectiveness of those tactics. So we'll touch on that briefly. We'll go through the biggest challenges, right? So you can kind of have a moment to go, that's a challenge I'm experiencing. I relate to that, or that one, to really kind of think through that. Or if you think that everything's kind of good, I can identify what those challenges might be, so you're aware of them and can prevent those things occurring for you. We'll then go into the solution, so the sales hire readiness process. So that's the scorecard that James has got. I talk about the idea of building a sustainable sales process, and the way to do that is to move those markers on the sales hire readiness scorecard that James has produced. We'll then dive into the team hiring process. There's a few elements to this, and it can go, there's so much depth to hiring the right team and looking at it from a sales lens and getting that right person in place. I'll give you enough to have really informed conversations, whether it's with someone like James when you're going, hey, I want to bring on a rep, and like, these are the types of things that I'm thinking, or someone like myself, where you can say, hey, this is where I'm at. What are the pieces that I need? And I'll give you some good takeaway tactics as well. I want you guys to have paper and pen or your phone out there ready to take a couple of notes, because there's going to be a few kind of one-liners that I throw out that you'll be like, oh, I can action that straight away. Whether you're hiring someone tomorrow or in 12 months time, I really want you guys to leave with little takeaways that can help increase revenue for you straight away. And then the last thing, to wrap things up, I'm going to make a little bit of an offer to go through your scorecard results with you on the house. So we'll talk about that at the end in some more detail. So anyway, that's what we're going through today. First up, we have my background. So my background, like I said, I'm a founder who's both self-funded and raised capital to build businesses. I've raised around about 500K in pre-seed capital, which anybody who's raised capital before knows that it's super, super hard to actually get cash before you've got proven traction in the market. So I've been able to do that, build a team around things. Unfortunately, that business wasn't successful, but man, oh man, I learned a lot about building together a team really fast and knowing what investors want and how the whole capital raise process works. I've also self-funded businesses, and like I've got there in point number 2, referencing that business that I joined the founder when they had $1,000 in revenue, a piece of software, and we're trying to sell B2B. And I jumped in there with some good sales background, having already raised capitals, having done plenty of sales in previous businesses, but really taking way too long to get going. The only reason we were able to get to that first million in revenue and get through that learning curve was because we'd actually raised a fair bit of cash. If we were self-funding, if we were going through that, normal timeline, like I certainly didn't achieve the growth that I would have needed to in the first 3 to 4 months in that business. But now I'm working with business owners and employing these skills and getting massive transformations in 3 and 6 months. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide here. So this is a little slide about my friend, Peter van der Merwe. He is actually the reason I got started doing what I'm doing now. He had a conversation with me and said, hey, Pete, I think I need to hire a salesperson. Can you help me out? I'm a founder. I've hired people before. I've built my business, over the last 7 years. We've got some good revenues. Things are going well, but I just don't have a background in sales. So I'm a little bit nervous about making sure this all works out right. And you've been and lived this journey and hired salespeople and that sort of thing. Can you help me out? So I started going through the process with him, and I said, Pete, you're the founder. You have a really natural sales ability in yourself. Why are you wanting to hire a salesperson? He said, well, I want to grow the business. That's what I've got to do, right? And I said, well, what if we hired you an operations person? That might actually be a little bit cheaper. We train you on sales. We put some systems in place so you actually become really, truly sales hire ready. And then at that point, we go and hire you a sales rep. So we did that. And you can see there in point number 2, basically, I went on and trained Pete in sales, set up some processes, got the CRM in order, trained him on a sales methodology called TAS, and looked at, pricing models and different things. We only spent 2 hours a week together, right? So it wasn't a huge, commercial investment for him there. And what ended up happening was within 6 months, we ended up tripling the revenue of his business just by going through getting him sales hire ready. Right? Like, what an astronomical result. Like, if you'd brought in a salesperson and they'd tripled your business, you'd be, doing backflips and very, very happy. We did this without even hiring the rep. Now he's going off and building out the operational side of his business because he needs more capacity to be able to handle more sales and hire that rep. And that's kind of the last step in the process for him. But that's just an example of what can happen when you start putting these things in place. You make more revenue, you get actually sales hire ready. And you've de-risked yourself as far as being part of that 48% of first sales hires who don't make it. All right, so getting into the juicy side of content now. So we've got the key mindsets that I like to talk about. Now, there's so many mindsets and things that can really help you with sales, but there's 2 fundamental ones as a founder that I feel like you need to have when it comes to building sales and building a sales team from the start. So the first is that the dark art of sales doesn't have to be unknown. And that's the beauty of the scorecard that James has got, right? It's a 4 or so minute scorecard that with the questions, you actually get a score out of 100 overall, as far as how sales hire ready you are, but in each of those 4 sections. And we'll talk through those in a moment. And so when you have numbers to how you're progressing as far as putting together a sales, readiness environment, it's it's not unknown. It's tangible. It's measurable. You can see, okay, if I'm going and doing this now and I'm at this score, I'm either, really quite ready, or I'm taking a bit of a risk because I know that I'm not quite there yet, rather than I think I'm ready. Get clarity, right? Dark art of sales doesn't have to be a dark art and unknown. The second thing is, and this is for all you founders out there who are a little bit nervous about the concept of sales, right? Who have had slimy salespeople try their manipulative sales tactics on you over the years. And look, I get it. I've been sold to by all sorts of salespeople as well, right? I'm a big believer in selling with ethics and integrity, and I've certainly had great sales results and closed great sized deals with very large organizations across the Asia Pacific, and I haven't been using slimy sales tactics. So just be open to this mindset is I guess what I'm encouraging, that I can be a good human, I can make good sales and make good money. It's not either or. It's and, right? And it's just a matter of staying true to those principles, really understanding and learning how you can do sales ethically with integrity, and get a great result for your clients, because then they'll come back and they'll refer you. And it's actually a formula for doing better business when you really do sales from a wholesome place. All right, let's get into the biggest challenges when starting a sales team. So first off, I hear so often, oh, I'll just hire a salesperson because I don't like sales, and they'll figure it out and our business will grow because that's what they're paid to do as a salesperson. Let me give you a hard truth. If you want to hire a salesperson who has the talent to go and build a sales engine from the ground up, you're hiring someone who's at least $200,000 a year. Most small business owners can't afford that. And those people who are getting paid 200 grand a year, I've normally got job offers at all of these big different corporates who make it so much easier to hit their commission targets, give them all the support in the world. And you also have to have the right character, right? I've worked with lots of salespeople who've had 20 years in a big corporate and they're extraordinary salespeople, but you stick them in an early stage business without the support, the branding, the targeting, all of the information they get given when they're in a big organization. They actually don't have the skills and experience to go through that, or it's a whole new learning experience for them, right? So hiring an ex-VP of sales versus, say, hiring another ex-founder or someone who's actually been a first sales hire before or has a bit more of that entrepreneurial mindset is really quite important. So anyway, that's part of why we're talking about the salesperson hire doesn't fix everything. You want to set things up so that you can bring in somebody who's affordable for you and actually can be successful, which involves a little bit of this environmental setup that we've been talking about. Number two, founder hires a salesperson and wonders why they can't sell like they can, right? I can close 8 out of 10. Why can this salesperson only close 2? Like, what is going on here? Let me be real with you. There is something that you have as a founder that is not replicable, right? And that's the reason that you're able to get a business off the ground and turn nothing into something. That's an amazing, unique ability. But the good news is there are things that are replicable. And when you have someone like myself come and hear your sales pitch and the way that you talk about things, I can start pulling out the pieces that are replicable, that we can put into some marketing, that we can put into some lead gen processes, that a salesperson can come along and actually replicate, so that they're not maybe closing at 2 out of 10 when you're closing at 8, they're closing at 5 or 6. Expecting them to close at at rates higher than you when you're actually good at sales might be quite challenging. I know sometimes founders don't have a background in sales, and so they can bring on reps who can outsell them, but don't have that as an expectation that, hey, they're going to sell at the rates that I am at day one. There is a learning curve. There is a journey. And the third point here is that you've hired a salesperson. And this is quite an interesting one. I've been brought into a few businesses with this situation, right? Where they've hired a salesperson and they're not hitting the numbers they hoped that they would. They're not, that growth that they were hoping from I've hired and invested in a salesperson isn't coming. And it's like, why is that happening? Is that the salesperson? Is that me as the founder? I'm not supporting them properly. Have they not got the right environment? Is it the product? Often founders are all thinking about the product, and that must be the problem. Or, you know, maybe we don't have marketing sorted, right? There's so many areas that can be the reason why the salesperson's not working out. And there's a little bit of art and science to working that out. And that's where I guess having a conversation with someone like myself or some external kind of business advisor or mentor or someone experienced in sales can give you more of a holistic perspective, so you know which dials to tweak and turn so that that salesperson can be successful. And the Sales Hire Scorecard that we've got in this is certainly a really good place to start from that. But I would encourage you to get an external lens, because sometimes as the founder, there's things right in front of you that you just can't see if you were the external person, right? Okay, let's jump into the actual solution. Now that we've talked about the problems of being of hiring your first salesperson. So the solution, there's 4 parts to the solution that come with James's scorecard. I say that these are the foundations of getting your sales hire readiness together and building a sustainable sales process. You can see I've got a little link here down at the bottom of my screen. So if you would like to go and take the test, and I'd really recommend that you do, it only takes 4 minutes. You can click on that link or copy and paste that into your browser and give it a go. So when you go and do the test, you get a result. So I'm just going to take off my PowerPoint presentation for a moment and show you what that looks like. So you get a little email that looks something like this. Thank you, James. Justified talent. You click on view results, and I've given you guys a little example here of a typical scorecard result that I see from founders that I work with. So you see here, you get an overall score. How sales hire ready are you? You can see that it's a 36% result. We sort of say about 80% is the mark that you're ready to go. So if you're getting an 80% result and you want to hire that salesperson, go and have a chat to James. He's your man, and he'll actually put in place the process to hire you that right person. If you're less than 80%, that's when it's really good for us to have a conversation. So if you have a look down here, you can see there's the 4 sections: the affordability, the systems, the marketability, and the enabling. And you get a specific number. Like I said, it's measurable for each of these sections. So I'm going to revert now back to the presentation deck. And let's talk about the specifics of those areas. So the first one there, like I said, is affordability. So don't expect said salesperson to show up and then from day one be crushing their revenue targets. I mean, if they do, fantastic. But really, if you want to do this as a risk mitigated, really strategic process, you want to have 4 months worth of that person's salary cash in bank. Now, certainly salary and commission, they're salespeople, definitely. Don't take the mindset of a commission only salesperson, particularly if you're selling B2B. Like the market rates out there, realistically, you can be an average salesperson, walk out there in the market right now and get a $100,000 salary with double that in on-target earnings, right? So be prepared. Like if you're hiring someone, James will give you the specifics on the right amount to pay for the person that you're looking at for your industry and all the specifics. But have 4 months cash aside so you can actually give them a proper crack. But don't hang on to them for 6 or 12 months if they're not hitting their targets and doing really not well. That's a sign that either there's something wrong, you're not sales hire ready, or maybe they're not the right fit. Point number 2, the systems in place. So systems really comes down to, there's a lot of things, but the 2 high level things that are super important are your lead generation systems. If you have a salesperson and you give them no leads, you say, hey, it's all up to you. Get out there, punch the phones, hop on LinkedIn, send emails, go and find business. It's all up to you. That's a really, really tough place to start from. And it's going to take them a long time to go and close deals and get that confidence. You want to have, even if that is part of their role, and most of the time in a small early stage business, it should be part of their role, some of this outbound work, but you want to be giving them a handful of leads to build that momentum, build that success, get them to understand the customer really quickly and have that baseline to kind of build from. Now, if you don't have that sorted, there's ways you can get that sorted. There's outbound agencies. There's lots of them that don't work, by the way. But getting really clear on how well you understand the market and your process of lead generation. If you've got some kind of process that you've worked out as a founder that finds your business, you can often extract parts of that and outsource some of that, or get support if you don't have the internal capacity to do that in the business. Again, something that we could potentially talk about. The other system to have in place is a sales methodology. Some people say to me, a sales methodology, what does that even mean? To give you context, a really simple one that's really well known in the sales space is called BANT, where it's kind of like 4 questions that you want to know as to how likely the deal is to close. Often I train in more complex sales methodologies, but dependent on what you need. That's a good one. Just Google BANT sales methodology, and that'll give you the 4 kind of questions to ask. And if you have nothing in place, use it today, and you will start making more revenue. 100%, because being clear on certain questions and how the process of sales is working is going to really make a difference in how likely you are to close a deal, how likely you are to spend time on deals that are actually going to close. That's a big thing when you're, spending your time as a founder, as a sales rep on deals that sound nice and might close versus actually have the legs to close really does make a difference. So I've been talking for a fair bit there. I'm just going to take a quick pause. I'm not sure if there's anything that's come through the chat or anything so far. I'll certainly go on to the next slide where we'll cover the 3rd and 4th part of the sales hire readiness process. But James, have we got any questions that have come through, or if anybody's got any quick questions on the content we've covered so far?
Nothing's come through as yet. I think people are just mesmerized, which is great. I've put a link in there for everybody to BANT. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, there's a link in there. The one thing I will, and I get you to go back one slide, Pete, if I can.
Yep.
Two things that I'm going to reinforce here. Number one is that 4 months salary. And I'm going to suggest to you that needs to be 4 months of their gross salary, right? So it's not just about the money that you're going to pay them net. It's about having all of their own costs covered. And of course, as at next week, superannuation's just gone up to 10.5%. So if you don't have 4 months worth of that salary in the bank, what that's going to do is at the end of month 2, when they haven't yet closed their first sale, or you haven't been able to at least invoice that first sale, and it's going to take that client another month before they pay you, you're going to start stressing out. And as you, as a founder, start to stress out, guess what? You give off all sorts of bad juju vibes, and it throws your salesperson off kilter. You don't need in the first 3 or 4 months to be throwing your salesperson off kilter, right? Because of your mindset. So have 4 months in the bank, that gives you runway, right? You're not thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, at the end of month 2. And then, yeah, that's probably all I want to say for now.
That's perfect. Thanks, James.
Back to you in the studio.
James, always full of character. It comes along with his recruiting efforts. All right. 3rd thing on the list there is marketability. So marketability and understanding your target market and customer is a really broad ranging topic. From a sales lens, there's a couple of key things that I point out. You really need to understand enough about the customer. And when I say enough, I'm talking about what problem do they have that means that they will spend money with you? What's the situation that means that they're actually willing to spend some money, that they're willing to have a conversation with you, that buying what it is that you offer actually makes sense? Do they have the means to buy? Do they actually have the cash? Are you selling? Are you, having conversations with people who don't have access to the budget, who don't have the money? They've got to go and get 16 credit cards, or pray to people 3 levels up from them in the organization to get access to the money. And the reality is it's just not going to happen. Getting really clear on that. Of course, the need in general, do they actually need it? Is this solving a problem that's big enough, a need that's big enough that it makes sense for them to buy? And do they actually need to buy now, right? If you're spending your time with customers who need to buy in 12, 24 months, sure, that's great. You're always building a pipeline. But don't spend the majority of your time there. Qualify the timing, set something in your CRM to catch up with them in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whenever it is that's relevant for them to buy. But if you're understanding from a market perspective, these things about the customer, what drives all of these things, you're going to have a much clearer perspective on how to do outbound, how to find more leads, how to, provide the salesperson the information they need to go out and find you more business. The next part of marketability, which is kind of where these insights often come from. I'm all about a sales meeting, right? I know people have various different feelings about meetings internally and sales meetings and all sorts of things. But if you have a well-run sales meeting every week, right, not only are you as a founder or your rep being kept accountable, really tracking where deals are, thinking creatively about how things can move through the pipeline, how we can make sure we've got enough pipeline so we can reach our revenue goals. You're learning a lot about your customer. And the most important thing that comes out, and I call this the sales and marketing feedback loop, is when you close a deal, why did they buy? What was the situation that they were in? Why did they need to buy now? You find out these things in the sales meeting when you're closing deals and having your wins and those types of things. And that information not only goes directly across the sales team if you do have multiple people, or back to the founder, but it can go back into marketing, it can go into customer success, it can go all the way back into product. If you're getting feedback, there's so much gold in a sales meeting that comes out of closing deals that can be fed into these other parts of the business to grow the overall engine and ecosystem of your company. It's not just a sales meeting, is basically what I'm saying. Then comes enabling. So this is the actual running of those sales meetings. Like James said at the beginning, when you go and hire a salesperson, you don't have the same job anymore if you want to look after them properly. If you go, cool, I'm founder and you are salesperson and you're taking care of sales, like I said, you've got to be paying them more than 200 grand a year. They've got to be wildly talented and they're probably wanting equity in your business. If you don't want that, if you don't want to be doing that, at least get someone, external, a sales coach, somebody else running those sales meetings for you. If you do, then make sure you've got the skill set to actually run and coach, sales meetings. Bring accountability and planning to the process of a rep. And I have the little without overkill comment in there in my slides, because some people go, well, we're a small business, everything's moving so fast. Why would we do a quarterly plan? Why would we have targets? We don't know enough yet. If you don't have the targets, then you don't know whether what you're doing is actually appropriate to hit a certain goal. You don't know as a rep, are you actually doing the right things as a salesperson? You don't know what the inputs are without having kind of at least a base level of structure and accountability towards sales. I'm not talking about having 2 meetings a day and, daily reports and really big, long spreadsheets. But there is a real value in doing sales meeting accountability and planning, weekly sales meeting, quarterly plans and targets, annual plans and targets, and working out, am I doing the things to hit those numbers? The second part of enabling is personalized rep development. So think about if any of you have worked in a larger business before. Quite often people start out as juniors and they go through the learning process. If you're hiring a salesperson with 2 or 5 years worth of experience in sales, they've got some experience, but taking them to the next level is super important. Think about the type of people that are salespeople, right? Yes, they're often branded as they're money hungry and they go after goals to make more money and those types of things. But think about the driver that comes into that sort of person who's willing to risk some of their salary to make more, right? That's someone who's growth orientated, right? They're willing to risk, not making, the same amount of money because they've got commission as part of their income package, right? So you really need to facilitate that growth culture within somebody who's in sales. And you need to support that with the right culture. And so what I say by the right culture is being okay to walk away from deals. Often as founders, we had to hustle and take anybody that would do business with us to get started. But when you're hiring a rep, when you're building an organization, it then becomes about, how do I spend my time most effectively? Because the more time you spend in front of people who have the means to and the needs to buy, the more sales you're going to make. So what that means is, when you have a first conversation with someone and you use the BANT process or something to find out if they actually have access to the funds and these different things, If there's a very, very minimal chance they're ever going to buy, you need to be okay to qualify them out, and you need the rep to be okay to qualify them out. Qualifying out saves you time and money and makes you time and money. The second thing that I talk about from a culture, and it's also a little bit of a, I guess, a mindset for sales, is the challenger mindset. There's a really great book called The Challenger Mindset. It's off the back of a really broad research study around what makes the most successful salespeople, right? And it talks through the different profiles of a salesperson and things like that. But the core message that comes out of it is that you want to be challenging people on their decisions. If someone has a completely rational, well thought through reason as to why they're not going to buy, perfect, move on, qualified out, let's get moving. But if they say something that it's them getting in the way, or they're scared, or they don't actually know the process, or, you know, all of these different things, they don't have the same insight and knowledge around the market or the product that you represent, you're becoming an expert. When you're selling into these organizations or selling a certain product over and over again, you see the results of what happens when they buy at a certain point, or you know, don't buy at a certain point, and what those consequences are. You want to have the confidence as a salesperson and the culture as a sales manager to challenge people when they say no. Do that objection handling from a wholesome place. And this is where you don't do those manipulative sales tactics. You walk away when they give you a really good answer. But if they give you an okay answer, challenge them. Make sure that they are making a really good decision not to buy. That's your job as a salesperson. Okay, there's obviously more depth that you could go into in each of these areas for sure. But look, taking a 4-minute test to get the results on where you sit in your business, I think is just an absolute no-brainer. So James has provided that scorecard for us to take there, and you can see we've got the link at the bottom of the screen here if you'd like to go ahead and do that. So
I'm going to quickly kick in.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Go for it.
So just on the marketability piece, right? You've probably all heard that phrase that in order to end up getting somebody to buy from us, we each need to go on a journey where we get them to know, like, trust and respect us, right? So I often refer to that know, like, trust, respect bridge. We live in a day and age today where the capacity to make big inroads to the know, like, trust, respect thing is like it's never been before. And I'm really talking about our online presence, right? So whether you're using SEO, whether you're doing LinkedIn content, whether you're doing masterclasses such as these, there's a whole raft of things that you and I can do as small business owners today that not so long ago really was only the prevail of the big end of town. And so one of the things you'll find in the scorecard that it looks at is how well have you got that piece sorted out yet, right? Because it makes all the difference in the world. And I'll close this point by observing this. I haven't made one single outbound sales call since January 2019, not a single one. Every single piece of business that we get in the Justified Talent business is inbound inquiry, or it's referral, or it's repeat clients. We don't do any outbound. We do tons, however, of that subliminal stuff, marketing, content, workshops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Really important to get your head around that today.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And that's what allows you to tick that box of, you know, we've got the systems and the marketability in place to provide a salesperson what they need to be successful when they hop in the job. So yeah, so good to be running this session with the guy who actually created the scorecard. What an honor. All right, you can see on this page, I'm not going to labor on it. It's just a little link to my calendar to book in a free time to debrief the scorecard if that's something you're interested in. And I'll put that back up at the end of the process as well. Now into the team hiring plan, right? So we've talked about, you know, the things that you need so that you can build a sustainable sales process. Now, hiring a successful sales team is a bit of a mammoth task. So I'm just going to give you some high-level things to start thinking through, contemplating, asking in your interviews, in that planning process that you go through. So the first thing is the natural profile and the skills profile. So the reason that I separate out natural profile and skills profile. So Personally, I work with something called Talent Dynamics, which is a personality profile test. There's all sorts out there. I really do recommend that you use them as a mechanism for understanding your team, no matter what role they're in, whether they're in sales or not. But when you understand the natural profile of someone, are they super creative and therefore they're going to have lots of ideas, but maybe not be on time as much, right? You know, are they really good with people, but maybe they forget to cross the T's and dot the I's? Like, what are those nuances and what are the consequences of hiring a sales rep with a certain personality profile? One personality profile in the system I use, Talent Dynamics, is called the STAR profile, right? They're the creative extrovert. They're very good at kicking down doors and finding new business and getting things excited, and often quite good at like outbound lead gen, not always, but as a general sort of high level, but getting them to kind of, you know, be really structured and disciplined with their sales follow-up and things. That's something that you as a founder, as a manager, need to manage to a little bit more. But if you're looking to do really big deals that are over long sales cycles, maybe you want a profile that's a little bit different. Maybe you want someone who's a bit grounded and extroverted, who can really like wait the time and bide the time for the right time to do really big, large deals. And so understanding the natural talents of an individual and how they operate is super helpful, because you can then overlay the specific skills that they've learned on top of that and dive really deep into that. And that's where James comes in with the different tests that he uses when he goes through helping you hire that first sales rep. So like I said, it really comes around understanding the type of person, not just, hey, you've got 10 years in sales experience, awesome, you're the right, and I like you, you're the right hire. There is a lot more in depth that you can do to really mitigate that risk of them not working out, and provide the right foundations so they not only work out, but really go on to become a great sales leader within your organization as you grow and scale. The second part is designing the role. So when it comes to designing the role, this is coming around those things that I was mentioning there about designing, you know, for the right profile and those sorts of things. But when I talk about designing the role, there's something really specific I like to talk to. And a great sales mentor of mine, JD, who founded Sales Director Central, taught me the question to ask in sales interviews. Tell me on 1, 2, and 3, how good are you as a salesperson at the open, navigating the deal, or closing the deal? Because there's 3 parts to that sales process. And to be frank, no salesperson is absolute ace at all 3. Often they can get very, very good at 2, right? Get them to opt in when you're in the interview process. When you're thinking about that salesperson, ask them, you know, are you really good at opening? Are you really good at navigating? Are you good at closing? Where would you rank yourself in a 1, 2, and 3 as far as your most to least area of talent in that area? That's how you can ask the rep that you're interviewing. But you as a founder, as an owner, as you're doing the team planning, think about that. Is your weakness, you need more lead gen coming through. Hopefully you've got it sorted and you've got the marketability sorted out and you've got the lead gen coming through. You know, or is it in closing deals? You need someone that can really go and bring home deals because you've got all this interest and momentum, but they're not kind of closing out. So being really conscious of what parts of that sales process you need the most expertise in, that's something really good to think through. And something that I'm doing with a lot of my clients is when we identify a weak point, for example, they might have a lead gen issue, right? We'll go and engage an outbound lead gen agency. Make sure that they actually work, because there's a lot of them that don't. It's really important the way you communicate to them from a targeting perspective and really managing them like you would manage a salesperson. Otherwise, often they don't work out. But when they do, they fill a gap of these one of these 3 areas for you. And then you can complement the salesperson with the skill set that they maybe need a little bit of extra support in and those types of things. I know that might be sounding really expensive, but there are really strategic ways that you can put these pieces together and cash flow this from more sales, right? As you're fixing up this sales hiring process, you can build more revenue to move these pieces. And so, like I said about my mate Pete at the beginning of this process, who became sales hire ready, we had that strategy lens and went, okay, sales hiring comes after we've done these things. And we've certainly more than cash flowed him to the point where you know, inserting these different things can make sense. We then come over to the next section, which is the key interview questions. So this is, I've already referenced one about the open, navigate, and close, but I talk about sort of the $100,000 salary threshold, right? if somebody that you're interviewing says to you, oh, I really need to understand the product, I really need to understand the nuances, you as a founder can often get excited and be like, really great, they care about the product, and that's what I've used to sell. When it comes to being a sales rep, there's a really key learning pivot point that comes, and you stop going from, I need to know everything about the product and the details and the nuances of everything. That is really important to know, and you do need to reference that in the sales process, but you start focusing more on the problem that you're solving, right? You become you almost become a business strategist as well as a salesperson. You're looking at your customer and you're trying to understand what problem do they have and what impact does that make to their business, and what's the ROI, and how does that go against the other priorities that they have where they could spend their money. And you really start getting business curious, right? That goes on to the second point that I make, which is that, often people hire salespeople that talk a lot and are charismatic because that's what we think a good salesperson is like. There are certain specific sales roles where that is super helpful, but most of the time, and especially in B2B sales, what actually means that someone's going to be a good sales rep is they're business curious, that they've gone through that process of really being problem focused instead of product focused, and they ask insightful questions. You don't need to talk a lot to be a great salesperson. You need to ask really specific, well thought out questions that get the prospect thinking through things that they maybe haven't thought about before, right? Often people say to me, well, how do I close this deal? It's sitting in limbo land. I said, what's the process look like for the buyer? And they said, what do they mean? They said, they'll get back to me in a month, when they're ready to buy. And they want to buy, but they need to go off and, get some approvals. I said, what do those approvals look like? Who actually has to approve that? Do they have to write an internal business case? Like, you almost want to project manage that process from, where we are right now in the sales process to the signed off dotted line done deal, right? And the only way you're going to do that is if you're business curious, you ask insightful questions, get the prospect to think through all of the things that they need to go through to make a buying decision. And last but not least is the sales team planning. And I've marked on there on the slide, what is ideal, right? Because there's a lot to go into this, and hiring your first sales rep is a big process to go through. But when you start to step back and think about, who would I like to be a sales rep, right? If I had a year before I was going to hire a sales rep, who would it be? And, who's the ideal person, rather than just let's go out and find a sales rep, quick hire them, stick them in because I'm busy, right? You'd go and you'd think about, who else do your customers buy from? Okay, so they buy these services from that person who's maybe complementary or a competitor or something like that. And who's doing really well for them? What are the characteristics of those salespeople? Are those salespeople looking to move on from roles, right? Like, when you start understanding who else is selling to your ideal customer, what is making them successful, it gives you lots of insight into the type of person that you should be looking for as a salesperson. And the other point that I've got there is obviously talk to James, because he takes this to a whole extra level of detail and insight, so that you really do go out with an informed approach to hiring your first, second, third, fifth salesperson, and really building it into a proper sales engine for your business. So look, I covered a lot on that slide there. Hopefully that wasn't too detailed, but I think this is a good chance to just check in with you, James, if there's anything you'd like to add when it comes to really thinking through that team hiring strategy to get it right.
Yeah, look, I think probably one of the key things that I advise my clients is, because by the time I'm putting candidates in front of them, we've done a big chunk of this already, right? And so by the time I'm putting a candidate in front of the client, what I'm saying to the client is, probably the key thing you want to do is two things. Number one, have a conversation with them, get that conversation to be free-flowing and two-way, and out of that, kind of work out whether you could imagine being in the same space with them for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, right? Because if you don't click as human beings, hell's bells, that's just, it's not going to go anywhere, right? Now, that might be code for cultural fit. A lot of small business owners don't really know what their culture actually is and to a lot of circumstance, it's still in evolution, right? In terms of the culture that we are today versus the culture we're going to be in 3 or 4 years' time. However, here's the really more important thing. What is your client's culture like? Now, for a lot of you, that will be wide and varied. There'll be all sorts of things. For a lot of businesses, though, there's a certain kind of client that we consistently deal with. For me, it's small business owners. So I know what your culture is like. I know you don't have 3 $35,000 color copying machines in the print room because you're a small business owner, right? So bringing a salesperson to, in front of you who's used to the big corporate polish, that's just not going to work. So yeah, importantly, think about what are your ideal customers' cultures like, and will this salesperson be able to sell to that culture? Or is it going to make your customers go, holy crap, who is this? Go away. Yeah.
That's a great insight, James. I think, like, I was working with a client the other day, and they'd hired a guy, and he was a gun sales rep, right? But he was one of those people that was really, let's say, focus driven and could really direct a conversation aggressively, right?
Right.
And this client was in the wellness space, right? And, great sales rep, wellness space, need to be a little softer, right?
Yeah.
Like approaching it like a corporate sale, not the same decision-making process, not the same buyer. To that guy's credit, he's gone through a really great journey I've seen, and like really started to approach the sale in a different way. But that's a learning journey, right? And so if you're ideally finding somebody who's already at that place and selling to the right customer and got that right culture and persona type fit, that really does make it easier. So being aware of all of these things, right? Because you as a small business owner don't have forever normally, unless you're well cashed up, which small business owners, not always, most of the time not. These things all extend the period to success, right? And that's why we want to be sales hire ready, is so that it doesn't take you multiple years to hit those targets that you dream of your first sales rep hitting. You put these things in place, maybe you make the revenue that you'd hope that salesperson would make just by getting sales hire ready. Then you've got an even more robust foundation to start from. So that's what we've run this session today, to really help you think through those things, from an experience lens. James is out there hiring day in, day out, seeing these things play out. Myself, who's lived the experience of being that first sales hire and lived the experience of being a founder multiple times. So that's covering off most of the content for today's session. I'm going to wrap up. We've got a cool little QR code here, which takes you to my calendar, and you can book in a complimentary sales scorecard debrief. So if you'd like to go through that, that one's on the house from me. If you're under that, if you've got that result of less than 80 in your sales scorecard, like I said, that's a revenue generating opportunity before you even hire said salesperson, and gives you that ability to have a more robust foundation to bring that salesperson in. And even if you do have 1 or 2 salespeople, like, you may not have this at an 80+ score result. I've worked with clients who've had scores in the 50s, and they've got salespeople that are working out. You know what that means? That means you've got so much opportunity for easy revenue uplift, right? By putting these things in place, you'll get better results out of your salespeople really quite rapidly. And I've gone into teams where that's been the case, and within 3 months, we've gone and doubled and tripled their revenue in the business. So look at this as not just okay, am I hiring one more salesperson? Like, am I hiring my first salesperson? Do it or don't. If you're anywhere sub 5 salespeople, you really should be doing this scorecard and tracking your progress and how you go with it. Whether or not you're talking to James or I, that's totally up to you. And there's so much value to be had just from learning this content and executing against it. So you're not having to be one of those 48% who failed in that first sales hire. And of course, if you are of the 80, if you are ready to hire that first salesperson, or you've got a salesperson or 2 and you want to expand the team, but you really want to mitigate that risk and do it properly. And to be frank, save yourself a whole bunch of time as a founder who's very busy. You look straight at James, right? I first engaged with James when I was in that said, sales software role. And I was just completely overwhelmed with things to do, and I needed to grow the team. And so I picked up the phone and said, James, you gotta help me out here. And he went through the process and found us a great rep to bring into the team. So he's your man for that. So think that's about me covered. James, any final words of wisdom for the attendees today?
Oh, wisdom? No, not really. I've put the URL into the chat for those of you that want to go and take a look at the scorecard. I think some of you already have done that, which is terrific. One thing I will just assure you each about, if you do the scorecard, don't be worried that you're then going to go into some funnel and be rung at 2 o'clock in the morning and all that kind of thing. It's not what we're about. It's not how we operate. When you're ready, I know that you'll make contact. So, don't use that as a reason to not go and do the scorecard. Go and do it. Go and learn some things about where you're at. And as you saw with the example that Pete showed, you will get a very comprehensive report that gives suggestions as to things that you might want to consider doing more of, less of, differently, or better.
100%. And share it because it's free.
Yeah, please.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, James, so much for putting on the webinar today. Thanks, everybody, for coming along. I know it's tough as a small business owner. I know it's tough as a first sales hire. This is a really key point in the business, because if you get this right, your ability to scale, grow the business, sell the business, take it to where you really want it to be. It's just one of those really big hurdles that is really challenging to get through. And as someone who's, experienced the challenge of it, I really, hope that you're able to get through it successfully and build the business of your dreams. So thanks, everybody, for coming along today. Stay in touch, connect with us on LinkedIn. We're always sharing content and things like that. And happy sales hiring.